Today I'm going to show you a full disassembly of a Droid 2 Global R2D2 edition. This is not an easy phone to work on. There are many reasons that I would not recommend ever doing this repair, but on occasion you may decide that you want to try it. So if that's the case, we'll start by removing the rear panel from the phone. Remove your battery, your SIM card, and your memory card if you happen to have one. They're located right above the battery compartment. And now you get to remove a whole bunch of stuff off of the back. So I recommend using a liberal amount of heat to remove the panels and that little mesh wire that goes to cover the rear speaker. And get your pry tool going to this. These are pretty easy to get off. The hard part is quite a ways inside the phone. So just go ahead and pop your panel off the back where the camera is located at the top. And down at the bottom, you see you've got some adhesive there at the top. And there's actually a hidden screw right there where I'm poking. You've got to get underneath that, and if you don't know it's there, you'll never get the panel off. So right now I'm going to heat up the bottom, and we'll remove a plastic panel from the very lowermost portion of the phone, and this hides a couple of screws. And then this wire mesh, if you go under it with the razor blade and pull, it's kind of hard to describe here, but you don't want to bend it any more than you have to, because it's hard to get it looking good when you put it back on. So as you're pulling up, actually pull like I'm pulling in the direction it would be down for you. That one came off pretty easy, but those things are going to get bent up one way or another, it seems like. So we've got a few Torx 5 screws that we're going to remove, and several at the bottom, some of them hidden. I haven't removed that panel yet, so go ahead and take these out. Don't forget you have to cut that adhesive, or at least pry it back so you can get to that hidden screw. It's very hard to see. You see how I'm going under there with the razor? That thing will drive you nuts if you don't know it's there. So just pull that out of the way, and you've got a screw you've got to remove. And each of these droids, starting with the original Droid, Droid 2, Droid 2 Global, and then the R2D2 edition, they're all similar, but they're different. So especially when it comes to just above the battery compartment, there's another screw that you sometimes have to remove. Sometimes you just loosen it and pull a plastic panel down. Each phone is a little bit different, so you just have to inspect it carefully and make sure you're not missing anything. Take these screws out from the bottom. And I believe we had 3 right above that little pry panel. And you see there's one right in there that may have had some adhesive under it also. Oh, I'm pointing out there a couple screws that stripped, excuse me. So this one was a particularly painful repair. The phone was just not cooperating, and someone had actually attempted to disassemble it previously, and they stripped out a couple of these Torx heads. So I had to go in with a larger size Torx bit. And at one point, you'll see I actually bring out the drill, because I had to drill the heads off the screws. It was the only way they were going to come out. And then once we remove the panel, we can go in with needle nose pliers and remove the remaining part of the screw, and hopefully have some spare screws on hand. I happen to have a whole box full of Droid 2s, because typically they are not really worth repairing. At this point, you can buy them for about $75 to $100 for the entire phone with a good ESN. So unless you're trying to retrieve data from this, and in that case I would normally recommend that you just do a board swap and extract it that way, because this phone is quite a bit of labor for very small payoff. So I believe I've still got the strip screws. I'm pointing them out there, and I'm going to take a drill. I know this looks scary. You want to be very careful. You never want to really have a drill near a cell phone, but if you're very, very careful with it, you can just drill out the heads. And you'll see that I'm doing it a little bit at a time. That is the only way these screws are coming out, and that's the only way the phone is going to be disassembled. So again, do this at your own risk. I mean, even touching this phone, do so at your own risk. It's pretty solid when it's in one piece, but when you start taking it apart, it just doesn't like to go back together properly. Things don't function all the time. And probably the biggest liability in this phone is the flex cable. The main flex cable is literally paper thin. And if you get one little scratch in it, which is very easy to do, it will not function properly. You will have to buy another flex cable. And I think the last time I checked, there was running about $25 a piece. So if you're doing a lens for $75 and you're going to have to spend $25 out of pocket to get the replacement flex cable, that in addition to the labor that you're putting into the phone, generally is not going to pay off. And again, if you're trying to extract data, try to find a donor phone so you can just do a board swap. You can see I'm not even into the board yet because this phone had been tampered with by someone else. And when you strip out Torx screws, occasionally you can go to a larger size and remove them. In this case, that did not work. And you'll find that when you get to the front half of the phone, just beyond the sliding mechanism where the B housing would be, when they use the crosshair screws in some of these phones, they're very easy to remove. The ones that use the Torx screws are particularly difficult and very easy to strip. So you want to be very careful when you get to the front. You see here shortly. So I believe I've drilled through most of what was there. Now you see this little tab I'm pulling on. You will have to pull this panel here off the bottom. Got ahead of myself there a little bit. And we start prying. Oh, that's a surprise. I could have sworn there was one more panel at the bottom on this phone. Memory's failing me. So we'll pry around the top, and just between where the SIM card and the memory card are located, sometimes you'll see a little plastic piece that you have to pull. You see this screw is just about destroyed. Sorry for not being able to focus on that very well. So we're going to have to drill that one a little bit more. And I think at this point the heads fell off the screws, so should be able to access the main board. You can see those finally drilled out. So I'll have to go after that with some needle nose pliers and pry around the perimeter very carefully, very shallow pry. Don't cut any cables. You do have a speaker cable at the bottom and power buttons and so forth at the top. And this horrible power button design that Motorola decided to use is very, very sensitive. When the connections break off, you pretty much have to find a donor to replace them. So just be real gentle with this phone if you choose to work on it. You can see I lost, I think my power button or my camera button there fell out. Fortunately, not the part that's attached to anything. And it looks like I've still got part of that screw stuck in there. Okay, so we finally got the last one out, pulled that apart. And now we have a few flex cables that we're going to have to disconnect. And I always recommend starting with the, it's the buzzer down at the bottom. Well, let's go ahead and take the remaining piece of this out. So our speaker assembly usually will just about fall out of the bottom. There are the screw heads. Now I think we can finally get down to business here. So go ahead and remove your external speaker. You have a flex cable attached to the vibrator, and if you forget about this, you're going to tear it every time. So I make that one of the first things I do. Just get under there with your pry tool. Make sure you disconnect that, bend it back a little bit so it has plenty of clearance. And you can start disconnecting your flex cables. You've got two on the top of the board, and then you'll lift the board up after you've disconnected the antenna wire, and you'll see there's another flex cable, or pop connector if you want to call it that, on the bottom. So those two disconnect, and we'll come over here and disconnect the antenna wire. And then we're going to angle the board towards us, towards where those two cables were located. And you've got three more Torx. Three more Torx screws you have to remove before you can do that. Okay, now you see I just about tore a cable there, turned it over, and the board fell out. Fortunately, it's still attached. So we'll flip this over, and you'll see on the opposite side of where those two pop connectors were, there's an additional one on the bottom, so we're going to disconnect that. And from this point, we have our board completely separated from the phone. I would say at that point, find another phone to put that board in, because the rest of this is not fun. But again, just for the sake of education, I'm going to show you the full disassembly here. So I believe we've got the other end of the antenna wire I'm disconnecting from the bottom, and then this plastic panel will pull outwards, and you'll be able to release it from the frame, from the slide mechanism. I usually like to go and remove the barcode label, the serial number and everything. That sticker tends to get in the way if you don't. So you might want to heat that up a little bit and just peel it back, or you can pull it completely off if you want to. We're certainly not going to preserve any warranties with this phone, and it hasn't been made for a while, so it wouldn't make a difference anyways. Pull that back a little bit and you'll see that that plastic panel is now exposed, and that needs to come out from beneath the sticker. And I find that when you slide the phone open, it comes off a little bit easier because you actually kind of roll this thing outwards, just like you saw the motion that I was using there. And what I probably should have done is just went ahead and taken that sticker all the way off, just for visibility purposes. But we've got a bunch of Torx screws on this one, and some of them are hidden. You'll have to adjust the slide to access all of the screws that go around the perimeter of the front half of the phone. Make sure you don't miss any of those. Look around thoroughly. If you do, you're going to end up bending the screws, and then you'll have another mess to deal with. And again, these are very soft screws. The crosshair ones I prefer. I usually take out the Torx and then replace them with the crosshairs if I happen to be working on this phone, at least in the past. So we'll go ahead and start taking these off. I believe that was T4 if I remember correctly. Check and make sure you've got the right size Torx, but I know that it was not a T5. So that's going to be, yeah, almost definitely a T4 we're using here. And as you can see, I'm applying a downward pressure when I first start turning the screw in order to break it free. Motorola likes to torque some of this stuff down pretty tight, so rather than risk having the Torx slip, if you apply a slight downwards pressure, you'll get a better grip and prevent that slippage. Again, you don't want to go too hard. Remember, you do have an LCD under there, so not too much pressure. But if it starts slipping at all, you're going to have a heck of a time getting these out. And you definitely don't want to be drilling on the front half of the phone. So just take your time, be careful, and cross your fingers. If you strip something, you're going to add a good 10 minutes worth of work for each screw that you damage. And this is where the fun begins. We have to release this panel that's covering the flex cable before we can do much. And you're going to want to be very, very, very careful when you release this. You'll see I release it from what would be the bottom half. I would recommend that you go from the other side, the opposite side from where I pried this panel away. I've found that it's actually easier if you go on the opposite side. I'm prying under the side that has two different clips on it. If you go with the side that has the single clip, it's a little bit easier. It's a little more risky because it's right next to the flex cable. So be very careful. Like I said, you get one little scratch in that thing and you're going to have trouble. Again, just peel that sticker off if it gets in your way. And once you get this out, you'll have to use some heat and just kind of very gently get the flex cable unstuck from the slide mechanism. And you also want to line it up to the point where you're going to be able to slide it through. So you see the position I have the slide in right now will actually allow the flex cable to pass through without getting snagged. If you snag this thing, you're going to damage it, almost definitely. So go ahead and use your heat and very gently, very carefully peel the flex cable away from the panel. And hopefully you'll get lucky like I did and not damage it. Like I said, this thing is made to self-destruct. So very carefully lift the panel off. Since you have all your screws detached, you're going to have very slight resistance, if any. And the main thing you want to focus on is that flex cable, because it just wants to break. And we'll very slowly, you'll see I'm actually, the LCD started to pull out because of some adhesive there. So I'm going to push the LCD back down. We want to keep that with the front for right now, but mainly I'm going to concentrate on getting that flex cable through. Once we do that, we can kind of relax and breathe. You see this thing is fighting me a little bit because I've got adhesive touching it. And again, great reason to remove that sticker from the back of the phone. So I had that adhesive also on the back of the LCD that was making it stick, so I'm just kind of freeing that up right now so that I have some room to work. And now I should be able to feed the cable through. And I think the slide got out of position while I was working on it. Not a good thing. Very easy to cut that cable. I'm really actually surprised I didn't damage this one. And on your first attempt at this phone, you will almost definitely break something unintentionally, so you have been warned. Okay, so once we feed that through, now the rest is easy until we get back to the reassembly. And Motorola likes to do some funny things here, like I said. One of them is using this really weird adhesive flexible tape that's just a pain in the butt to pry off. At this point, you'll also notice that the lens on this thing comes with, there are two different digitizers basically, so you have to order the proper one. They are not cross-compatible because it has a different size flex cable attached to it. So I'm heating up that tape. You peel that off carefully because you have a gate underneath that needs to be released before you can pull the cable out. You can see we've got the right one. I wanted to verify I have the right part. You see how those two are the same width. There's actually a narrow flex that does not work with this particular phone, and the model number is identical, so you won't know until you take it apart which lens you need to order. Another great reason not to work on this phone. So once we've got the tape removed, we're going to remove that. We're going to disconnect the flex cable here, and then be very careful. The speaker is actually attached to this main flex cable also, and we want to just pull that out. And then I'm going to free the speaker, earpiece speaker that is, so that that comes out right along with it. And I have the main flex still attached to the LCD. You can see the speaker's kind of hanging down underneath. So that's all one piece. And at this point, we have access to the front half of the phone. Nothing else is going to break very easily. We just heat it up and go ahead and remove our lens, put on the new one, reverse the process to reassemble it. If I have time, I will try to make a reassembly video. I'm not going to make this a priority because this phone is generally not practical to repair anymore. But nothing tricky here. Just go ahead and heat it up, get your pry tool, go underneath, and the lens is pretty easy to take out. And the new lenses on this one thankfully come with an adhesive, so you don't have to custom cut anything. You can see that the adhesive actually is still good inside the frame, and we want to go ahead and make sure we remove this screen. I made a mistake earlier. The adhesive doesn't come with the lens. It's actually built into the frame, so we're going to reuse it this time because it's still pretty sticky. Just make sure you remove this net from the speaker cover, because you can imagine if you put this whole thing together and you miss that, going back to redo this would just be ridiculous. So go ahead and stick that on your new lens, install it, and proceed as usual. Hopefully you will never have to work on this phone. If you do, let me know how it turned out.